Rob McCoy, Turning Point's faith co-chair, good friend of Charlie Kirk and Charlie Kirk's pastor. He just got back from South Korea. Pastor, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good, Glenn, and I think you're a likable character.
Spend some time, get to know me. Come on. So let's talk about what you experienced in South Korea. We talked, I think, a week ago, or maybe a little longer, where they're starting to. I mean, it's bad. I talked to the pastor's son last night from Korea on the TV show, and it is really becoming dystopian and authoritarian over in South Korea.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Hemingway novel, The Sun Also Rises, where he said it happened gradually, then suddenly, and that's what's happening in South Korea. They've packed the Supreme Court from 14 justices. Now they're going to 30. It's no longer rule of law; it's rule by law.
Yes.
And they just arrested the communications commissioner. It's awful. I mean, I met with Assemblywoman Na, who was a previous judge, and she's the longest-serving Assemblywoman in the Conservative Party, and she's fearful. I mean, they're making a hit list to get all these people arrested, and we're losing an ally rapidly.
Yeah, and if we lose that ally, we don't really have a way to protect Australia, New Zealand, Japan. I mean, that is a massive strategic area for us, and that's not my first concern, but it is a very large concern. My first concern is what's happening over there is happening to all of the Western world. They just are a little further ahead than it's seemingly everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Chinese. So we took a flight after I had spoken in Pastor Sohn's church in Busan, and then we flew into Seoul to meet with some folks and also do a protest in front of the courthouse for Pastor Sohn. But on the plane, it's interesting. That day they had lifted all visa requirements for Chinese, and the Koreans are the most polite people on the planet. And we get on this plane, it's packed. And as we're getting off, they're bum rushing to get off the plane. And they said these are all Chinese people, and that if they're there, I think it's 4 months. They have the ability to vote. China's invading without any shots being fired all of South Korea, and Pastor Sohn is a rarity in that country in that he's standing in opposition to it. And most of the pastors are silent. They're starting to get encouragement, and they're starting to stand. And we did have a good attendance in the protests in front of the courthouse, but we got a lot of work to do to get these people awake. Like I said, we're going to lose an ally, but more importantly, this country's going to fall to communism.
That is so crazy to think. I mean, when we think of North Korea and what they've gone through and how close of an ally and how they are for freedom and they understand North Korea, they have just this new regime has come in and done everything that has been tried to be done in Europe by just opening up the borders, except they're opening it to communist Chinese, and it's just slipping away so fast. How long do you think before it's done?
Well, you know, I met with some business leaders. I met with politicians, and the greatest stopgap we have, and I don't know if the administration knows this. I'm, you know, Glenn, you're in the book of Who's Who. I'm in the book of Who's He. I'm not a political operative. I don't know, you know, a lot of big names. But I do know that I don't even think we have a South Korean ambassador appointed right now.
We don't.
And the greatest stopgap we have is tariffs. If the president can establish two-tier tariffs by simply saying, look, religious freedom and no arresting of the opposition party, this will be your tariff. If you don't, this is what you're going to get. And just smoke them, because these business owners want their country back. They're willing to take a hit because they're watching the country evaporate before their very eyes. And the president can do that with these tariffs. He did it for two reasons. One is to bring manufacturing back, and two is to have political leverage. And this country needs help. They've been our greatest ally. Real quick, I spoke in Pastor Sohn's church on that Sunday, and it was to the day, the 75th anniversary of the UN forces liberating Seoul from the grasp of the communist Chinese, and here we are, we're giving it right back to them because we're sound asleep at the wheel.
You saw the pastor for what, 10 minutes with his son
Yeah,
for the first time
wife.
since he's been arrested. What was that like?
You know, the man is amazing. I go in there and I sit down. His wife is there, and she's strong as can be. She reminds me of the Korean equivalent of Erica Kirk. But she hasn't lost her husband. But here he is in prison, and he just said, "I'm standing strong." And I told him, I said, "Pastor Son, you're the freest man in Korea because you're here in obedience to God, and obedience to defiance to tyrants is obedience to God." And he's doing that. And then I told him, I said, I came here because you're my friend, but more importantly, to fulfill a promise for Charlie. And I've never seen this man cry ever. And you don't cry in Korea. And he broke down crying. And his son even commented to me, "I've never seen my dad cry like this. This is unbelievable."
Yeah. He told me that
Because
to me
Charlie,
last night. He said, my father broke down in tears. He said, I didn't know what to even think. I've never seen him cry.
Yeah, but he even said, "I'm on a mission trip," and I said, "You're probably going to have to stay here until the church wakes up." And he says, "As long as it takes." He's committed to getting his country back. And most of the folks I talked to, I said, "Look, you guys are going to be political dissidents if this doesn't hold out." And they said, "We're not leaving our country. We're going to fight for it." God gave us this country. It's important to us. It's important to America. And I wish our government would wake up to it, which I hope they will. And churches, because of your help, Glenn, are waking up. A lot of pastors want to go over there, but the current president has now outlawed foreign protesting. He's doing everything he can to just stop any opposition voice. And I'm surprised that I got out of the country because I turned to the police and I said, "Look, Romans 13 says you're a minister of justice to execute wrath on those who would do evil. You don't point your gun at those who are doing good. You're here to protect the people, not enslave them." And then I walked right through with my friend Stephen Martin, Pastor Stephen from Texas, and we walked through those police officers, looked them right in the eye after I said that. 5 of them were looking at us like, "Thank you," and the others were bowing their head in shame. They're in a lot of trouble, and we got to pray for them, but we also have to activate as a government.
I'm going to call the president either today or tomorrow. Rob, would you just write a note to me and tell me exactly what you need him to hear, and I will pass it on to him.
I will do exactly that, Glenn.
Yeah. How can we help?
Well, first of all, Glenn, I just want to commend you and your entire audience. You have been the pebble in the pond, and the ripples are going out. And there, the definition of a friend is when the whole world goes out, they come in. You're that friend, and you have created this stir. So I would say to all of your radio audience, any connection you have in your circle of influence, get this out. Most of the pastors I'm talking to, they're saying the same. We didn't know. We just didn't know. Well, it's catching on, and it is like wildfire. And we know what those are out here in California. And you're starting a fire, and I'm grateful for it. And
it's happening so fast. I mean, when you think of South Korea, you don't think of it being a country that is about to be taken by the Chinese. That's about to go communist, and it's already gone authoritarian. I mean, the things that they have done now, they are just arresting anyone who is a conservative. They're just arresting them and throwing them in jail. They're dismantling everything. As you said, I mean, I talked to Alan Dershowitz about, the rise and fall of democracies. And he said, the last thing, and this is the knockout punch, is they change the Supreme Court, and they usually end up, doubling the size of it or whatever. He said, when they do that, you no longer have the rule of law. And as you started with, they've just done that. I mean, it's so bad for the West, so bad.
Yeah, just to give Americans an idea, especially conservative Americans, we went through the Biden administration. Imagine Kamala winning and getting the House and the Senate by filibuster-proof majority, packing the Supreme Court. That's where we are today. They would be suppressing religious freedom. They're silencing opposition voice. They would have put President Trump in jail for 700 years. They would have imprisoned his family. That anyone who stood with him, they'd be imprisoned. Just what we went through, just imagine it. exponential, and that's where Korea is right now.
Your sign of hope? Oh, from over
Well,
there? How are
yeah,
let me ask you this. The
yeah.
people that did and I don't even want to mention names, but I had one of the young ladies in my office, and she said, we were part of this, Charlie. We brought Charlie over, yada, yada. And I said to her, you're going home and you might be arrested. She said, oh, yeah, I know, but I have to go home. How are they feeling? How is that movement?
Because of that young lady's work and these young people, there were certain times where I'd be in a large mall in Seoul or I'd be in Busan. People would come up for autographs because they had seen either the church service or they'd seen YouTube videos produced by a number of, outlying non-traditional media that we had done there. And they were coming up for autographs. They wanted a picture, and it's young people. They want their country back, and they're looking. They started a movement there, and pastors are waking up as well. So my hope is that there is 20% of that nation that is committed to doing anything necessary to stand in opposition to this, even be put in jail, and we've got to come and help them. And I told them, I said, look, Churchill was completely surrounded. All of Europe had fallen, and he held on in Great Britain until America entered the war. Hang on. I'm going to go back and do my best.